Hello, and welcome to Loyola Marymount University. My name is Dennis Draper, and I'm the Dean of the College of Business Administration. Each year, we are fortunate to bring in a number of prominent business executives and special guest speakers to participate in our CBA lecture series. From high-ranking government officials, to leading journalists, to internationally acclaimed social entrepreneurs. All of our distinguished speakers share one common goal: to educate our students and local community on some of the biggest issues in global business today, all while reinforcing LMU's underlying mission of teaching business with ethics and social responsibility. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the presentation.
I'm David Choi, Director of the Fred Kiesner Center for Entrepreneurship. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to our 53rd Hilton Distinguished Entrepreneur Award and Speaker event. Okay? Let me start with a question. How's everybody doing today? Good. All right, that was like a B minus, but we'll move on. Any entrepreneurship majors here? Okay, some, but I don't know what the rest is. Anybody from the College of Business? Okay. Any alums? Oh, quite a few. Any athletes? Okay, that's unusual for our events. That's good. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Come to more of these. Okay, we have these every semester. All right. I'm very excited about our speaker. Any of you excited? Yeah. By the way, I'm very uncomfortable with this mic. I feel like I should be singing. I feel like I'm at a karaoke bar. But I'm very excited about our speaker for several reasons. One, I think Bill was a pioneer in a growing industry. Anytime you're a pioneer, it sounds good, but what you got to do is you got to leave your comfy job in the legal profession. By the way, it's also very awkward to see yourself on the screen. And join an industry that's a little risky, right? So you got to take the risk. And I hope my entrepreneurship students and many of you will have the courage to take a risk at some point in your career. But as a result of taking the risk, he found success. He made the list of the most powerful men in sports, for example. He worked with some well-known athletes like Michael somebody, J something. Jordan, okay, I've heard of him. Also other athletes like one of my favorite shooting guards, Allan Houston, right? Rasheed Wallace, Daunte Culpepper, Joakim Noah. I heard he's got a bad knee. I just heard on the radio. I don't know if that's true. So that's great. And we're very proud of his success. But that's just part of the story, right? I hear about Bill. I hear rumors. I hear he's a guy with high integrity. He cares about the athletes. He mentors them. He's not just about transactions, but about their welfare for the long term. Okay, that's something that's very important for us at LMU. Okay, and I also hear about his personal life, how he grew up with little means, but he worked really hard to attain his education. I know some of us are very wealthy, but some of us are also working really hard to attain your education. And I hope some of you, as a result of Bill, get inspired to believe that things are going to work out. And then lastly, interacting with Bill, and all the staff feel the same way, by the way, that we're very surprised about how in his emails and his correspondence, how how nice he is, how modest he is, how generous he is with compliments. And so we were very impressed, okay? He's just, in simple words, I think he's just full of class. Okay, I hope you feel the same way when he's done. So the question is, where does a guy with so much success and so much class, where does he come from? It so happens he grew up in LA and he went to LMU. Okay? And Fred Kiesner, professor who actually was going to join here, but he has surgery tomorrow. The reason we have this, and we have 53 of these, is to inspire you guys to want to do your best and want to be up here as a Hilton speaker sometime soon. Anybody interested? Okay. Devin, okay, I have hopes for you. So I hope that at the end of his speech, you'll be inspired to do your best and be as classy as he is, okay? Now, before you get to talk, please come up here. One more chore you got to do. Anybody have a camera? Natalie? Oh, there we go. Okay. So we're giving you a plaque, whether you want it or not. And this is what it looks like.
Oh, that's nice.
You get to take it home. And I'm not going to read everything, but it starts with William Bill Strickland is one of the most successful business executives and sports agents in the nation, blah, blah, blah.
I like the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much time. And then it ends with, Bill is known and respected for his integrity, vision, expertise. LMU is proud to honor Bill for his entrepreneurial excellence, powerful leadership, social responsibility, and impact on the world. Can you take a picture?
Thank you. Who's taking it? Oh, there you are.
All right, everybody, can we give Bill a welcome?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. I appreciate it. I don't need a mic. Oh, I hear myself. That's not good. Well, good evening. How's everyone? As you've been asked before, I'm a little upset, so you got to give me a chance to settle myself because normally it takes me around 25 minutes to get here. And tonight, of all nights, it took me around an hour and 40 minutes. And so for those of you that have come and hoping that we could spend some time chatting before we got started, I apologize, but I'm prepared to stay as long as it's possible. They tried to get me off the campus early when I went here, but I'm ready to hang now. So it's all good. It's quite a gathering, and I appreciate very much the opportunity to speak. And where's Devin? Devin? I'm going to blame you for this, or we're going to see what happens. You may get credit. Professor, I appreciate the kind introduction. Perhaps you exaggerated a bit, but it's okay. But I'm really, truly honored to be here this evening because I'm well aware of some of the speakers that have come before me and in this forum, and they obviously have been very successful people. Great role models, and so I'm very proud to be now listed among that group. But I have to also tell you that tonight is special for me. I've been fortunate enough to speak various law schools and business schools around the country. Spent some time teaching at Wharton, at George Washington University in DC. But tonight I feel kind of like this is a homecoming. And even though I've been on the board of trustees for a term, I have not had this kind of interface with students. And I appreciate the fact that you've turned out tonight. It's flattering. I'm humbled. And I just, it does bring me back home, makes me feel like this is where I belong. So I appreciate you coming. And hopefully what I share with you, to the extent I can share, will be inspiring, and I'm prepared to stay until everybody has their question answered, if that's possible. During the, I guess the next 30 minutes or so, I've been asked to share a little bit about myself, a little bit about my career, a little bit about sports. And what I would like to do is do that by sharing with you some thoughts, some deliberations I've gone through, and what I call juxtapositions of positions in my head. You find, particularly in working with professional athletes, that sometimes you may have equal weighing facts, and you have to lay them side by side and make some recommendations as to what course of action should be taken or not taken. And so that's why I kind of call it juxtapositions, as opposed to something that might be deemed to be mutually exclusive or counterintuitive. But first, I need to let you know something. My business is a horrible business. It's dreadful, demanding, time-consuming, and you get involved with babysitting. And I hate to tell you this, and I'm not terribly proud of it, given the introduction, but I've had to attend 26 NBA All-Star games. I have been dragged kicking and screaming into about 8 Super Bowls, even a World Series. I've had to travel the world. And you know, the interesting thing is I've done all of this on somebody else's dime. So I'm just warning you, it's a tough business, but hey, somebody's got to do it. And I've done it. I will share with you, though, it was funny. I went to Manila one time and landed. It was around 4 in the morning and checked into the hotel. And my secretary from D.C. called me and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "It's 4 in the morning here. Of course I'm okay." And of course it was 4 in the afternoon in Washington. I said, "Why are you asking? Why are you calling?" She said, "Because a military coup just started." Really? I went, turned on the television, sure enough, blood and guts, a little bit. Had 18 NBA players, 2 real coaches, 2 real referees. We were to play 2 games in 4 days, and we ended up sitting in the hotel for 4 days. So sometimes it does get to be a little bit hairy. Before I really get started, too, I want to offer 2 editorial comments. One, I am still sensitive about attorney-client privilege, and so in client confidences, so there will be occasions where I may not get into the kind of detail that you might be seeking, especially those of you sitting out there with social media and Twitter. So I don't apologize for it, but I hope you appreciate the fact that I will only go so far, and to the extent that I may throw out a name and a number or whatever, then it's because it's been disclosed elsewhere and it's in the public domain, so to speak. The other thing is for the ladies in the room. I will have references, or will make some references about male athletes, and it's not in any way to disparage what women have accomplished and continue to accomplish, because obviously there's some very significant female athletes in the world. It's just that I have not had the good fortune to work with many female athletes, so the references I make to males is not to denigrate in any way females. So I hope you accept it as that. Since agreeing to speak tonight, I've asked myself something that Professor alluded to. Am I really an entrepreneur? Or, as some of my colleagues and friends have suggested, am I a pioneer? And I've also asked myself, is there really a difference? And I will leave that to you to answer. But I tend to think that I've been more pioneer than entrepreneur, even though I've owned my own business and sold it. And that's in part because I stand before you as the longest tenured African-American agent in the country. Now, I don't know if that's good, But in a way, it's a commentary on the development of the business. But for me right now, it is a reality. And as such, I have felt a certain, I would say, social responsibility that has driven me to try to put myself in a position where, as to the extent I reach back, I'm on solid ground and can help someone else come along. And that has driven me perhaps more than the desire to make a lot of money and become famous. So I would say that I'm probably more more of a pioneer. A little bit about my life, and I'm not comfortable in talking about that, but the foundation of my life was my mother. And then she was supported by sports, something that I've always been into. I would have to say that, you know, with the 6th grade education, she always pushed me to get my education. And I followed her advice because I became the first in my family to get an education, to go to college. She also would say, well, would repeat what I considered to be her mantra, because anytime we were confronted with some difficult situations, she would sit, pray, and then she would sit there and say, it will not always be like this. It will not always be like this. And in time, I began to appreciate the fact that she was exercising her faith, that she was demonstrating her strength, that she was holding on to her dignity, and she died with her dignity. In fact, when I gave remarks in her funeral, I said she had nothing else but her faith and dignity, and that's all she needed to live in this world. I was very proud of it. But what it did for me is it helped me develop a sense of self-determination, of resiliency, of direction, and it kind of drove me. And so I attribute that foundation to her. And then as it relates to sports, I've always been competitive. And sports put me in a position where I could define myself as a man, competing with other males. In the absence of a male figure in my home, that was important to me. And very, very honestly, my competitive fire was even driven more because of some early experiences with racism. And I wanted to make sure that if I got on the field or got on the basketball court or ran whatever I did, that I was equal to or better than the person that didn't look like me, who may have made certain unfortunate comments. So I was driven early on to try to succeed. My mother's pushing me, and then the idea of competing in sports as I tried to define myself as a person. I also started to learn, though, in the process about how to peel away at the things that confronted me. I always tried to peel back the layers so that hopefully I would get to a core. And in getting to that core, then I would hope and I would try to see if whatever I've drilled down to was, more manageable than what was perceived initially. I recall many times going to a dentist or having my knee drained later in life after an injury, of sitting there and saying, okay, what do you really feel? Forget about that long needle. Forget about the fact that the dentist is sitting there smiling as he drills. What do you really feel? And I have found that sometimes that perception of what confronts you, if you really look at what you're confronted with, you can get to the point where you start seeing, okay, I understand what I'm dealing with, and it's a lot more manageable than what I initially perceived. It was and also one thing I have to mention is, in this process of trying to grow up, and given where I grew up, where our conditions were not great, and at 4 months, no hot running water, no electricity, whatever, just the usual array of creatures that you normally get in that kind of situation. I realized that I could survive despite the circumstances, and I would not let that drive me down. And so I continued to press forward. But I didn't appreciate at the time how much what I was going through was preparing me to eventually represent professional athletes. All I knew is I was dealing with life and circumstances as they came. I also realized that I was developed and had developed, I think, a pessimistic view of the world. I kind of viewed things as the glass is half empty rather than half full. I know I would look at things off the time and I say, well, my view of the trees was the trees, not the forest. Now, in a way that served me well because it kept me focused on what I was trying to accomplish. But on the other hand, it didn't allow me to open up to a broader perspective. And I think in the long run, once I started learning that, and once I started my business and started looking at how to connect dots, I appreciated what I had in front of me, and I appreciated the effort, and it made a little bit of a difference. I played ball at Fremont High School, and it was in high school when I really started dealing with what would, again, turn out to be some thinking, some change, some training, and some juxtaposition of positions that would put me in a position where I could appreciate working with professional athletes. At Fremont High School, I played with a guy named Curtis Rowe. You're too young, perhaps, to know of Curtis Rowe, but Curtis was the Los Angeles City Player of the year we took the LA championship. I was co-captain with him. He averaged 36 points a game. He was a 6'7.5" center, and he was mechanical in terms of his talent. He was not fluid at all. But I observed this man day in, day out, weekend, just putting in the work. And I began to appreciate the fact that sometimes, even in the absence of what might perceive to be talent, you can succeed. Because Curtis went on to play at UCLA. He won a number of championships there. He was drafted, I think, as the 9th pick in the first round by the Detroit Pistons. He played in the NBA for a while, and he had a successful basketball career. Around this time, too, though, I remember playing a pickup basketball game. I think I was in the 9th grade. And the team was playing what is called a 2-on-2 box half-court zone, and that's where you have two people out at the top of the key, one guy standing in the paint defending, and two at the baseline. And I was a point guard, so I had my swag on, and I got by the first two guys. I went up to take a jump shot, and this guy in the paint ran out, and he did not block my shot. What he did is took it out the air and started a fast break the other way. What in the just happened? I never have anybody snatch my ball out of the air like that. Started the other way. And I watched this guy, and this is in the 9th grade, but I later came to know him better, and I played pickup games with him at Pauley Pavilion. He walked with talent. He moved with talent. He was smooth to the point where little or no effort. He turned out his name was Sidney Wicks. He was an early version, 6'8", of Magic Johnson. At that height, at that time, and remember I said Curtis was player of the year, 6'7.5" center. Here was Sidney handling the ball like a guard. And in those days, that was really something. But then what he did for me is I said, I see Curtis through hard work succeeding, and here's Sidney with extraordinary talent succeeding. Extraordinary talent. And they end up playing at UCLA together. And a trivial question for you sports fans. Who was the center at UCLA between Jabbar and Walton? Anybody? I think it was a guy named Steve Patterson. He had Sidney and Curtis on both sides of him, and they won a couple of championships. And so I saw, again, extraordinary talent. I don't know how hard he worked, but I knew the guy on the other end worked extremely hard. And again, as I am looking at things in my head, I'm thinking to myself, okay, you can succeed. I found myself somewhere in the middle. But also around that time at Fremont, I was an 11th grader playing center field, and I know I used to look across the field and look at two guys, Glenn and Markham, and Glenn looked like Mr. Peabody, Coke bottle glasses, big head, big joints, long limbs, and he ran like Forrest Gump in his braces. The other guy was an Adonis body, about 6'5", couldn't have been more physically talented. He never made the connection, though, with his head and his body. And I recall standing in center field just saying to myself, I don't care how long they practice, they will never be as good as me. And it wasn't arrogant, it was confidence. It was what I was observing. So now I come to the 12th grade, and here comes this gangly guy, 10th grader, playing third base. And mind you, at Fremont, ball was always competitive. He'd field the ball, look at his glove, watch you run a little bit to first, and gun it over. I'm standing at first base now, practically having my glove taken out of my hand. He's standing in left field, take one step all the way home, one bounce within 2 to 3 feet of where he was throwing it. Enormous talent. He's standing at the plate and basically flicked his wrist off the fence, over the fence. Another supreme talent. And I said to myself, no matter how hard I try, I will be good, but not as good as him. I had the fact that I was good confirmed by the fact that I got drafted by the Dodgers out of high school. The young man I'm talking about was named George Hendricks. Still too young to know, but George Hendricks played 19 years in the big leagues. We called him Cootie, but he was really something and did everything without effort. So I'm going through this development and search for myself, and I'm looking at extreme work ethic, extreme talent. And I started looking at where do I fit in? How do I fit in? And that helped, and those questions, that deliberation helped shape my thinking. And when I came to Loyola and played, I had a chance to observe it again firsthand almost every day in practice. As a freshman, I played against a guy named Rick Adelman. Adequate talent, Rick, superior talent. Rick, in fact, had a very nice NBA career as a player, and I think even a better career as an NBA head coach. All of that stuff and going back and forth, trying to define myself, trying to balance it, trying to understand, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but it was preparing me to deal with professional athletes. Because there are times as an advisor, you have to sit there and help them make judgments. And of course, we all understand that a professional athlete has adequate talent to play. Even the last guy on the bench has been Phi Beta Kappa in sports someplace. The question becomes is, in the middle of that work ethic, will he work hard enough to take him to the point of being a superstar? And I'm examining this, and later I found that it became important to how I advise clients. The other thing that was vague, though, and this is something that's not easily answered, when you find yourself with adequate talent, and in between adequate talent and superior talent, the issue is, when do you quit? How do you quit? When do you let go? Evaluating that, balancing that, and obviously a lot of pro athletes have trouble answering that until it's so obvious they've got to go. And there are those that hang on perhaps too long, but again, in the confluence of all that thinking, I started evaluating that for myself. Now, unfortunately, I had to answer that question because my senior year here, I suffered a knee injury which ended my professional athletic pursuits. And I had to go on with now looking at real life and evaluating what I was going to do. But for a period of time, I had to evaluate, am I going to let sports go? Because it's been such a long part of my life. And about a year after I graduated from Loyola, I said yes. So what I did is I went to work for Rockwell International, didn't know what in the world I want to do, ended up going to get an MBA in finance at UCLA, left there, still didn't know what I wanted to do, so I ended up applying to law school. After I had a semi-Rodney King incident at 59th and Crenshaw, I didn't get beat up, but I got stopped by 7 black and whites and 2 unmarked cars in a helicopter and cursed at, among some other things. And I knew nothing about stop and frisk, probable cause, search and seizure, none of that stuff. I said, well, maybe I need to educate myself. So got the MBA. I got accepted at Southwestern, and I got accepted at Georgetown in D.C. I never lived in D.C., knew no one in D.C., didn't have a place to live, no job or anything, but I made a determination. I said I could go to Southwestern where I could stay right in the city. I had a brand new car, I was cool, I had my little friends, I was comfortable. And I said I'd go to law school at night. But I could go to Georgetown where I knew no one, had no means of supporting myself, no financial support, and move across country, leave all this sunshine and go to the snow. And I decided, as I have in my life from time to time, to challenge myself. I already knew law school was going to be tough, but I chose to go to Georgetown instead of Southwestern. And again, that's not to say anything negative about Southwestern. The reason why, again, I applied there is because they had a night program and I could work during the day and support myself. So I went to Georgetown, and it was a challenge. And despite my MBA, I was unemployed for 7 months there. And I won't tell you how I survived, but I survived. But moving to DC turned out to be pivotal in my life and in my professional development. And I often reflect on that move now. And very honestly, it confirmed for me something that I believe very strongly, and that is that there's a certain web in life, a certain interconnectivity among our decisions, a certain non-randomness about life. And you can make plans and whatever, and then life comes in and kicks you and says, okay, now you're going to live life. And that's kind of what it did with me when I had hoped to play professional baseball, and I injured my knee and it was at an end. But in moving to D.C., it confirmed for me that there was a certain fabric in life, a certain energy, a certain assuredness that if you do the right things, or at least attempt to, and you try to live within your moral parameters, that good things will float back to you. It's kind of like some people say karma, put it out there and it'll come back to you. And after drilling down on my issues and the complications and the challenges I had in D.C., I began to realize I had an opportunity in front of me. And I think you would agree when you consider the following. I have to read this. I was attending a prestigious law school in our nation's capital, just blocks away from the U.S. Supreme Court. In the evening program, which is what I enrolled in because I had to, again, work to support myself, I had older classmates, more experienced classmates, and that was a much more enriching experience in law school. When I finally was able to find employment in the DC area, I worked for a company called BDM International. That's Braddock, Dunn, McDonald, 3 physicists who strongly believed in education. And because of that, they had as one of their benefits a tuition reimbursement program. Now, when I left LA, I was working for a company that was willing to pay me 25% of my tuition costs at law school. BDM paid 75%. And as a result, I graduated from law school debt-free. I was able, having studied finance at UCLA and how to evaluate capital markets, I was able to come out of law school and get a job as a contract advisor at the Securities and Exchange Commission, where we regulated capital markets. And so when I coupled my MBA with the JD, it was a wonderful experience because I was a newly minted attorney. I got to sit across the table from Wall Street attorneys. And, you know, they come in all smug and whatever, you know, and I just sit there going, because I had to sign the paperwork to approve their S1s and their issuances of stock. So it was empowering. It was confirming as a young attorney to sit there like that. But the most important thing about moving to D.C. in retrospect is that it was the home to a company called ProServe Inc. ProServe Inc. at the time was the second largest sports management company in the world behind IMG. And so it dawns on me that here I am. I happened to challenge myself. I went to Washington, D.C., and lo and behold, I now had an opportunity to marry my professional pursuits with what I had been tied to and loved all my life, and that is sports. The only problem was that I had to get hired. I had to get hired, but at least I saw it as an opportunity. And what was interesting, what made me appreciate it is that one day I walked into the office at the SEC, and I think it was in March of '83, and some of you were born by then, right? March of '83? Okay. I was cussing up a storm. I had a South Central flashback. And my office mate, Debbie, looked at me and she said, "Bill, what's wrong with you?" I threw down the paper. I said, "Look at this. The company I've been trying for so long to be hired by just broke up. A number of their founding partners went off in a separate way." And she said, "So?" I said, "So? I've been trying to get hired there." And she said something that made so much sense to me. She just said, "Well, now you got two opportunities." Two opportunities as opposed to one. Peeling back the problem, understanding what you're dealing with. I didn't do that. I was just reacting emotionally. She peeled it back real quick, said, "Yo, you got two opportunities." And sure enough, she proved to be right, because months later, I went and interviewed in the same building on the 11th floor with Advantage International, now known as Octagon. And I went up to the 12th floor 2 hours later and interviewed with ProServe. 2 hours later. Now, I want you to understand something else. I went to law school with about 8 guys who all wanted to be agents. And right away, I shut my mouth and started listening to what they were saying about their efforts to get into the business. I did not let them know. In fact, Eric Holder was one of the guys. I don't think he wanted to be an agent, but he ended up being okay as Attorney General. Oh, I'm almost done already? Oh, my goodness. I'm talking too much. Typical lawyer. I'm through, and I know we have to turn to some questions, but hold on. I appreciate it. But let me just offer for you students just some thoughts real quick. Final thing. I hope you realize how fortunate you are to be at LMU, for there are many others who cannot even dream about being here or being where you are. Use this opportunity here wisely. During your life and careers, try to do well while doing well. Try to do well while doing well. Undoubtedly, during your lifetimes, you will encounter difficulties and challenges. But unlike the classroom where lessons come first and then you are tested, often in life we are tested first and then hopefully the lesson is learned. And in this process, there will be lessons that you will learn and others that you will pay for. So just don't go through difficult times. I think the challenge is to grow through difficult times. And through it all and above everything else, I would encourage you to not abandon your compassion or your humanity. I think that's too important to let go. I wish you all continued success. And again, thank you so much for having me run my mouth a bit. I'm here, Professor, to answer whatever questions that may be raised.